Welcome, everyone, to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Heels Season 1, Episode 2. It's called The Dusty Finish. So, full spoilers for the episode, as always. And I was very curious to see how this show would develop and pay off that big finish from the first episode, and see how it dealt with the drama. And it did this thing where it chose not to focus as much on the wrestling itself this week, which I think makes a lot of sense. The fact that Stephen Amell's character, Jack Spade, even has a day job was something that was kind of not hidden from us in the first episode, but certainly did not dwell on it or focus on it or make us really think about it all that much. But of course he has a regular day job, because it didn't seem like they were making enough money from the wrestling shows to actually provide a living. So that stuff, I thought that was an interesting kind of like peel back of the layers of the episode. But I'll get into the various plot lines and characters and how I think they're developing here as we go on. I will say that I mostly liked this second episode. It's still not without flaws, and it's still not without elements that kind of stick out a little bit as being a little melodramatic or perhaps forced in some places. There's one sort of big wrestling, well, it's not big, but there's one wrestling nitpick I have from later on in the episode. And yeah, there's a few other things, but there's definitely these little touches that are being put into the writing that I think are fairly well done or are fairly smart. Simple little character things that are doing their best to try and sell me on some of these characters as being likable or give them some humanity, so that I'm rooting for them when they're mostly kind of miserable as characters go. They're mostly in this sad world where everything's not going very well, and the family life's breaking down a little bit. And I think to start with Jack here, Stephen Amell's character, I'm still learning the name, so I'm just kind of like, just kind of reinforcing it for myself more than anything. But we see Jack go to work, and we see that he's got this sort of young, shitty boss who's giving him a hard time. Although, to be honest, a boss saying that you should cover a black eye if you're a salesman at work kind of feels fair. I mean, he's a bit of a dick about it, but it's just not an unfair request. When you in the grand scheme of things. And he tries to sell this guy on this riding lawnmower, and it doesn't quite work, but he tries to sell it as a bonding moment for you and your child. Your son can sit in your lap, and you can have a drink in the cup holder, and all the rest of it. That scene, I think, stuck out. Obviously he's got a bit of showmanship, but it was actually after the guy sort of says, nah, I can't really afford a new lawnmower, I'm going to pass up, but thanks for the time. And afterwards the boss grills out Jack, and he says, no, I wasn't selling him on the sentimentality, I was selling him on the idea that sometimes you need to get away from your nagging wife, you have to get away from your whining son and just be on your own with the lawnmower. Which is a really weird, like, they're really trying to sell the drama and the tranquility of mowing one's lawn at this lawnmower store, which, I mean, I guess they have to try and sell the product, but it feels a bit of a stretch for what is basically a chore. Let's be honest, it's a chore. Imagine someone trying to sell a vacuum cleaner, right? A Hoover. Imagine someone trying to sell that with this same panache. Sometimes you just want to drink a beer and suck in the dust. Get away from your nagging spouse and your children and just drown them out with the sweet sound of the vacuum whirl. It's a bit silly. But what I did like about the scene is that when the boss says this to him, that this is how I was trying to sell it to him, I actually, again, much like the first episode, gave me that moment with Jack in the car where he was smiling because he kind of scared the kids a little bit because they're, he's the villainous wrestler. Is here he turns around and says, not every wife is nagging and not every kid is whiny. Like, he kind of sells it as, no, these are stereotypes. Some families are actually happy, and it kind of presents him as sticking up for the idea of his wife and his child, which also adds a little bit of dramatic irony to the episode, because a lot of his struggles throughout the rest of this episode are his kind of disputes with his wife, where there is kind of this fight. It's almost like when him and his wife do have this dispute over what he should do about focusing on wrestling and spending time with his son, and how much time he's not spending with them, he kind of like tries to deny that the fight should take place, but she like is like no, you're just like avoiding this, so I'm gonna go sleep on the couch. So the fight and the fallout from the fight kind of still happen, just without the actual main meat of the fight, because he's just not willing to do it. He's kind of in denial. So it comes off kind of nice in this scene with his boss, because he's effectively saying, no, not everyone's like that, and not everyone needs to get away from their wife and child. But of course, he is actually, with his wrestling, constantly being away from his wife and child. So there's a little, nice like layers to the writing there. That there's a little bit going on. I especially liked it when they're having this conversation and she's trying to say, hey, you should spend more time with your son. He's getting into soccer. Why don't you, help him learn? And he kind of fobs that off. And then she drops a line about how, although that said, it's hard for him to kick the ball around with the grass being so long. And I thought that was a really nice link into that previous scene. It was this idea that he's not been doing that, but it's not because he's staying with his wife and son, it's because he's just too busy with his own thing. Like, it's just mowing the lawn's not his passion, damn it. Right? It's not his passion. So, and then of course, yeah, with the ending, which is the dramatic irony of her saying, no, screw this, I'm going to mow the lawn. I'm going to get that dusty old lawnmower out. I'm going to mow the lawn so my son can kick the ball around. And her taking charge. You have kind of a flipping of roles, of course, based on expectations, which kind of proves what Jack's point in the first place kind of was, which is that, these are stereotypes, and the idea that that this is like how you're selling it to a guy, doesn't necessarily apply. But we have this other flip of it, which is no, that like she's going to mow the lawn, and she's doing it for her son, who needs a backyard to do, childlike things and play and, what have you. And then of course the killing of the squirrels, which is a big theme of the episode as well, is that there's a squirrel in the attic, and the son doesn't want to hurt the squirrel. Stephen Amell, it turns out, Jack doesn't want to hurt the squirrel. We later find out when he's talking to Crystal that he used to hunt when he was a kid, but then he breaks to not hit an animal in the road, and Crystal says, "What, you said you grew up hunting?" And he says, "Yeah, but I was always guilty as shit after it." That was the other moment in this episode where I kind of liked him. I was like, oh, okay, you know what? You're giving me some layers to this character a little bit. That's making him not be such just a stern-faced dick, basically. So there's these little moments, and it's that paints. What was her name? Stacy, the wife. It doesn't paint Stacy as being cruel for just getting the BB gun out or whatever it is, and like taking care of the squirrel in the attic, but it kind of presents this idea of her kind of stepping up and doing the things that he's neglecting, and that could be a recipe for more drama later. Could be more of a dispute later. It could be sort of if she's accepting this is the way he is, he needs to accept how his brother is. Everyone seems to need to accept how Crystal is, which obviously that was a big plot point in the first episode, and that continues again. Is sort of the dismissal of her and her wrestling talents and her opinion in place in this like group of characters, and her kind of fighting for it, and that's something we see throughout the episode as well. Which if I'll jump to her just now, so she's with Ace, who's living with his mother, and they're having very loud sex. The mother is especially spiteful about the whole thing. Doesn't make her food, although it did lead to a pretty good laugh later on with the when Ace is demanding he wants to go to the fast food place or go and get a burger, and Jack's denying it. But as soon as he says, oh, "Come on, Mum made casserole," he's like, "Wait, Mum made casserole? Okay," and he just immediately agrees to go get him some food. that was slightly funny. That was a nice little beat. But yeah, the way the mum dismisses her and treats her, and refers to her as an opportunistic. I don't remember what the word she used after that. It wasn't skank, but it was something in that realm, right? Something in that genre, and it made me kind of sympathize with her. Now, don't get me wrong. I do think Ace is a bit unlikable still, and Ace is a bit of a self-centered dick. So I do kind of critique her like taste and sort of cling to this asshole right now, But absolutely everything else with Crystal is super sympathetic. Like the way everyone ignores her, the way she wants to prove herself, but no one's paying attention to her. The way Ace's mother talks down to her, and she, she doesn't like hit back with attitude or anything like that. She tries to apologize for the noise. She tries to be nice to her, and everything that she gets in return is just bullshit. The closest thing she gets to kind of acceptance from the mother is kind of a thank you for bringing him home later in the episode, but that's basically it. But of course, she has some moments. She tries to talk to Jack a few times this episode. Jack kind of eventually opens up. The one moment she has, of course, is that she does also get involved a little bit in the bar fight when we get to that. The nitpick I have here, from a wrestling point of view, is something that always bothers me whenever I'm watching like a movie or a TV show where wrestling is inside of it, right? And it's obviously treating it like it is, like real wrestling is. It's it's a work. It's it's scripted. It's people putting on a show. That's what this show is very much about. Is these characters putting on a wrestling show? So I thought it was weird that when the guy at the bar insults the old, because basically the brothers have both decided that they've had enough now and it's fine, we can leave. But the guy decides to insult their father, and Amell turns like he's ready to like throw down, and instead Crystal comes in and hits the guy with a Hurricane Rana, and takes him down. And this maybe there's such a real thing as a real shoot Hurricane Rana that works, but a Hurricane Rana, which is someone jumps up, puts their legs around your head, and then sort of flips you over by doing kind of a backflip. In wrestling anyway, that requires cooperation from the person taking the move. It's something where the person taking the move will flip forward willingly. So it struck me as an odd moment that it was the first time it kind of treated so far in the show like a worked wrestling move, that therefore like a move that's done in a match where the two people are cooperating together and they're putting on a fun move because it's an impressive physical feat, is being used in a real way where it's supposed to have actually hurt the guy. But it's just struck me as a bit odd because I'm fairly certain that the person taking that has to cooperate and go along with it, so it felt weird to use that as the shoot move. Obviously it was supposed to like show them that she can do this, that she is capable of doing fancy moves. We see her interacting with the kids that are near where she lives. I don't know if they're little brothers or just like neighbors or whatever, but she does some suplexes on the trampoline. We get a bit more sense of just her kind of like fire and wanting to do this stuff. So that was a bit weird, but they also ignore her like immediately in the car. When she tries to bring it up, they just kind of sandbag her, which is a real shame. It makes them a bit more dickish, even though Jack does at least talk to her a little bit after the fact. As for the actual plot of Jack having to go and find Ace, Ace goes missing after he gets the bad news from Chris Bauer's character, who, let me just get his name, from Wild Bill. Yes, Wild Bill. The first part of this was a little bit frustrating because there's a fine art to doing something in a show or in a movie or whatever. In writing, there's a fine art that I can't even always pinpoint and tell you why it works when it does and why it doesn't work when it doesn't. But when you know exactly where something's going, you either achieve the good result of this, which is the anticipation because you're just on the hook and you're waiting for that bombshell to drop, and it works. But alternatively, and what can happen a lot of the time is that you know exactly where something's going and it's tedious watching the motions being sort of going through to get to that point. And what I'm talking about here is that early in the episode, Ace keeps phoning Wild Bill because he wants to know what to do next about his his potential move and push to his organization to become a star. And that he's not going to continue this, right? You know that the news is going to be that, hey, you're going to have to, as he puts it later, pump the brakes on that right now. But you have other opportunities, blah blah blah. But exactly that's where it's going to go once he eventually gets to talk to him. And it's not a lot of scenes, to be fair. You know, it's one scene where he calls him and gets mad and annoyed because he gets interrupted, and then it's a scene where he actually gets the phone call. But those scenes I thought were a little bit tedious just because it kind of felt like a foregone conclusion. And the character, while he's supposed to be kind of naive and he's supposed to not just get this, even though it's kind of obvious that this is where it's going, it just, you know, it's a little bit tedious, right? It's just, it could have been a little bit more condensed. I would have started immediately with, you know, the phone call. I mean, maybe have a scene earlier on where we see that he's waiting to hear and whatever, but get a sense of his mental state. But like, I would have like saved it until we got the phone call and just like had it from there. I think it would have been less frustrating. But you know, them going out and looking, I actually did enjoy a fair bit of the scenes in the bar. I thought there was some nice little touches to the dialogue in all of this, which is Ace is there, he's drunk. This is where Rooster, who's one of the other wrestlers, who's, you know, probably one of the more memorable characters of the bunch. He's wanting a push. He says that in this episode, but he's there doing karaoke. This is something he does for money as well, you know, because again, wrestling's not paying the bills. He has to do other stuff too. And Ace comes in, he's drunk. He wants to be given a spot. Rooster doesn't want to. He clearly doesn't think, you know, because he texts his brother. He says, "Hey, come and get him." He's completely drunk off his tits, and that's all fine. And he goes up and he's getting heckled. People are calling him a crybaby because he cried after the wrestling match and all the rest of it. And this guy like isn't a complete dick at first. You know, he kind of like just got to gives what Ace is putting out. And he even has a good comeback, you know, when Ace says, "Hey, remember when I was a senior when you were a senior and I was a freshman and I beat your ass?" And he's like, "Nah, not really, but clearly it was important to you." Like, that was actually a really good comeback. It was like, you're still remembering this thing from high school when I've forgotten because it's irrelevant to my life. It's kind of a great comeback. Like, you know, little details like that are fairly well done. But and so as the scene progresses, as when Jack and Crystal show up, and Ace doesn't even like notice Jack, really. He just kind of keeps this fight going, but eventually it escalates. It's going to come to blows, and you know, Jack just wants to take him away. But when the guy says something like, "Oh yeah, take your crybaby brother away before I beat his ass," or something like that, he turns around and it becomes this kind of almost camaraderie. Like they have to like work together as a team in this stupid bar fight to get some of this out of their system. And it works well enough. Him kind of sticking up for his brother at the drop of a hat, even though they're in this really weird place where they've not been talking, is well enough in terms of functioning as a bond between them. Same again when they both turn around outside when their father's insulted, where, you know, like they're so effed up as a family, they're so screwed up in terms of their relationship, but there are things where they just sort of like, you know, we're brothers, we're dealing with this together. You know, and Jack later at the hospital because they're going to see the other guy's new baby, and they have this kind of heart to heart where he's like, "Look, you know, next time you have a chance, I'll support you 100%." Ace says he never wants to be booed again, which I think is interesting given that Crystal just had a conversation with Jack about how he'd make a great heel because of how much of a dick he was being in the bar. Like, he'd actually be really good at heckling the crowd. So, you know, we'll see how that goes, and we'll see how much Jack adheres to that. But it looks like they're back together, and they're going to try and put on a show and tell a story. So, you know, I think most of the character drama in the episode works well enough. There's definitely elements of it early on where it feels a little bit like, okay, we're kind of plodding through a little bit of the beats just to kind of set up things. But once the moments actually come together, once there's like little touches in the writing that actually kind of ties the themes together between the different plots, whether that's the lawnmower stuff with Jack's family life, whether that's just the stuff, you know, the parallels between their mother and how she talks about their father versus what Stacy's going through. There's a line about how they need a new mattress, but he bought like a pyrotechnics machine instead, and just like all these things kind of building up and these acceptance of who each other are, which, you know, kind of boils down to what Jack says to Ace when he's trying to convince him to stick around as a wrestler. He says, I am just a lawnmower salesman, and you're probably, just going to be some loser in this, middle of nothing town if we're not wrestlers. But we're also wrestlers, and that's what gives us, like, the fire. That's what gives us life. Just being a normal guy and having a normal job is never going to be enough for me. I have to do this too, and I think you feel that. So that's the thing that's still going. And obviously, one of the plot beats that was brought up earlier in the episode is the fact that the guy who's doing the other company, the other wrestling promotion, he wants to buy the dome, as they call it. It's a very small dome, but it's they're building. And Amel's kind of like struggling with this over the course of the episode and decides not to sell because he needs this in his life. They need this. They just need it in their life, basically. I think this sort of approach is kind of the right approach. It's not treating wrestling or wrestling fans like they're idiots. In fact, something that Willie, the woman who works for Jack or with Jack, when she sees this guy and sort of like grills him on his like ideals and what he puts into his business and his promotion, is she mentions that you treat your fans like they're idiots who just want violence, and that's not what this necessarily is. And one of the things that a lot of shows that are or movies that are about wrestling are guilty of is treating people who like wrestling or treating wrestling itself like it's dumb, like it's stupid. And it's a bit silly, it's a bit carny, like, there's a bit of self-aware humor about the whole thing, I think, no matter what, but it doesn't, I think you have to go out your way not to talk down about the thing you're talking about. And it probably helps that Stephen Amell is a wrestling fan, he does care about it, so he's not there to insult it, he's not there to do that. So some of these ideas and statements, I think, are definitely in the show because there is, there's that sentiment where you have to defend it a little bit because people do look down upon it for whatever reason. Even though it's not really any different from any other fictional type of storytelling in terms of its legitimacy. But, it is what it is. It's got that reputation for whatever reason. And sometimes it doesn't help itself. It really doesn't. Sometimes wrestling can be absurdly stupid because they do stupid things, and you're embarrassed if you're in any way like associated with it. Which is, so there's improvements to be made everywhere. But I think those ideas coming up and these characters talking about what it means to them and it being a part of his life that he has to fight for and keep in his life, even if it is kind of at the expense of some of these like family responsibilities or some of these other things, as much as it can explore why he has to find that balance, I think exploring why he needs to have it in his life is kind of a love letter to what it is and what it means to him, and can have a lot of positive sentiment that comes out of that, which is something that I think this show should be striving for. It does still take itself a bit too seriously, don't get me wrong, but there was a little bit more heart in this episode, I think, which is nice. So I'll be curious to see kind of what they try and build now. Obviously a rivalry with this guy who's running the more hardcore promotion with the weapons and all that. I'm sure that's going to be a big plot feature for this season. It feels like that's really been set up now. Especially now, he kind of like might hold a vendetta and want to run them out of business, and we'll see them try and sort of rise up. Giving them a rival promotion is a really smart tactic, because it becomes less about the rivalries between the guys inside their promotion and them trying to rise to the top, and it's more about them working as a team to beat a rival promotion, because it builds more camaraderie, even though in storyline in the wrestling they're all fighting each other. And also, I mean, people will often talk about how the greatest feud ever wasn't two wrestlers in a storyline. It was the Monday Night Wars. It was WCW versus WWF, and like that was more exciting on a larger scale because it was this competition between two promotions trying to be better to win that fight, and maybe even some shady tactics to kind of like undercut the other and things like that. So there's a reason to kind of maybe go that route and take that stance with it. So I think there's some smart things being done there. But there is some melodrama here or there. There are some scenes where some of the fights between characters are a little tedious. For the most part, I've found their mother to be a little annoying. She's just kind of always complaining for the most part, and I've yet to really find a moment with her that feels like, you know, I care about her because she's kind of this like conduit for us because she cares about her boys and she cares about them in a way that maybe no one else in the show might. But for the most part, she just kind of comes off as being really, really spiteful about everything. So hopefully that develops over time, because I think that's something that might, you know, hurt the show a bit. Although that said, I don't know how heavily featured she might be going forward. For all I know, this could be the most featured she's going to ever be in this season, because, you know, she got a bit more this time than last episode. So we'll see. But yeah, so yeah, I'm still kind of hopeful for the show. I'm down to watch more. I'm down to see episode 3, see where it's going, and hopefully it keeps building on some of these characters, and you know, keep things going. So there you go. No, it's good. The drama of selling lawnmowers, maybe a bit much. Maybe that's a bit much, but for the most part, I'm having fun, and I'm looking forward to some more of the cameos, because I know CM Punk showing up in the show at some point, so we'll see how that goes. Maybe next episode we'll find out. I don't know, but that is episode 3. Oh, sorry, episode 2. That's episode 2 of Heels, and we'll see how it pans out. But let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments below. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. It does help out a lot. YouTube channels always tell you to do it, but it does genuinely help. Helps the channel grow. You can support financially, of course, over at patreon.com/MailerFlitzTV for as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses for your trouble. So if you want to help keep all the content coming, so I don't have to resort to selling lawnmowers with the passion of selling the family life with the lawnmower, then, you know, head over to Patreon and make that nightmare never become a reality. No disrespect to anyone selling lawnmowers. People need lawnmowers. It's a valid thing that people need. Lawns have to be cut, but let's not pretend that it's a family bonding exercise. But that's the show. I also catch us on Twitter at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. But that is me. So thank you once again for watching and listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?